people of all genders, just people.
My name is Martine Watkins, and I have been having so much fun interviewing just incredible leaders in our community, in our region. And today I'm so lucky to be here with my dear friend, Adam Spickler, who happens to be a Cabrillo College trustee and an extraordinary advocate for youth and education, but also somebody who's made history in our state and in our community as the first elected transgender representative. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Martine. Yeah, it's really nice to talk to you in this platform so other people are kind of enjoying and joining the conversation. By way of introduction, so I first met Martine when we both took Leadership Santa Cruz, back when I know I was working for then, I think it was then Assembly member, even though he's now Senator, Bill Monning. And I believe you were at the County Office of Education, but more newly. And I just so admired you then for anytime new concepts came up for you, you were one of the few people in that class and in life as I know who it really, the excitement of, oh, I think I just put two and two together and I see how this thing over here about how an environmental issue or a transportation issue impacts this other community or this other issue. And you're like one of those people who, when the light bulbs go off, it goes off everywhere and I see you start planning. And I see you start thinking, what's the policy way to really make things work better for everybody? Because now I understand this connection over here. And I love that about you.
Thank you, Adam. That's such a sweet compliment.
Absolutely.
I feel the exact same way about you. And you're so right. I get so excited and I just love talking with you because I know we share that approach to thinking and connecting and networking and bridging. And I loved being in Leadership Santa Cruz with you, and I love being connected to you in other ways now. And I'm really grateful to be friends to this day.
Yeah. Well, you know, they're problem-solving qualities, right? I think both you and I try to approach everything from how do we solve problems and those connections between things that sometimes don't otherwise seem connected. It's a big component. And I say that, you know, as part of kind of describing who I am and how I came into leadership. I was raised in a family, unfortunately, where there were a lot of problems. And I either needed to be part of problem solving for my family or there was just chaos all the time. And a lot of folks grow up in whatever level of dysfunction in their families where you take on a role. And I became so good at it in so many different ways. I think it naturally came to me in my adult life trying to figure out what do I want to do in this world. I started off professionally working actually in childcare. I took early childhood education at Cabrillo College, where I am now so lucky and grateful to be a trustee. It's such a phenomenal program there. But what I learned in all of the problem solving that I did my early life and wanted to do professionally, one of the things early childhood education taught me was behind that is the opportunity to stop and see what's the healthy impulse behind the behavior of those people in conflict or those issues in conflict. And kind of that patience you have to see the whole picture, to see the thinking behind and find the commonalities and then problem solve from there. And I worked in early childhood for a lot of years, did a little bit of leadership in early childhood and kind of got lucky to fall into a career shift working for John Laird when he was in the Assembly. And I feel like I took all that problem solving and communication skill stuff with me. And when John termed out of office, Bill Monning kept me on. That's when we met, when I was working for him in Leadership Santa Cruz. But it was really great working as senior district staff for state lawmakers. I had to learn a lot and know a lot about the state budget, state policy, and took that problem solving and that connectivity thing that I'd been developing so much, that meant so much to me, to figure it's more than just knowing the state budget, it's understanding how it impacts agencies locally at every level and how I can take what I understand, what folks are telling me about the state budget impacts, and translate that to the representative so that there's a meaningful conversation in Sacramento about the impacts of the budget. And I got fairly good at that. And I was able to translate that skill. Fortunately, I got offered a position with the county 7 years ago. It'll be 7 years this month. 7 years next week, I think, actually. I was offered a job managing contracts for the county, and now, currently, I manage about $10 million in CalWorks, CalFresh, employment services, housing services, really for folks experiencing homelessness, and some child welfare contracts, and a bunch of ways in which we as a county human services agency partner with local nonprofits to provide services more expediently and oftentimes less expensive than county delivering those services, but in a way where we partner together. And so that's kind of professionally. And the last thing I would want to say, just by way of introduction, in regards to running for the Cabrillo College seat that I did in 2018, Cabrillo grad, love that institution for all of the reasons so many people do. The teachers there go above and beyond to make sure students really walk out with more than just a degree or a certification. That sense of self as a professional and as a part of the community, I have something to contribute and mean something to this community, and I definitely left Cabrillo with that. And knew that with all that I learned about how the state budget works, how policy making works, and how government works, if I was going to be in leadership in government in elected office, Cabrillo is where I wanted to serve. It just makes sense to me. So I was lucky enough to be uncontested when I ran, which made it pretty easy. And there I am. And you were right in mentioning of all of the LGBTQ elected officials in our state, there have been 2 trans women who were elected as judges. There's been 1 trans woman who is currently an elected city council member in Palm Springs. And I'm the first male transgender individual or trans man to be elected at any level of public office. And so here I am, and I hope there are lots more people in the trans and non-binary community who join me
in that. 100%. I love your story, and thank you for sharing your journey. I sometimes, a couple things, like I sometimes go back to, thinking about how we're sculpted to be the way that we are, and then thinking about what you described as your upbringing and how that's led you to how you process and how you approach problems. And I think about some of the issues that I sometimes get kind of caught up in, and I always just really value your perspective, and just am so grateful to have you as a person I can kind of just bounce these things off of, because I really truly see that in you. And I know your professional career has been, mainly, but I know that no matter what you would do in your life, you would approach everything in that way. And that's just an incredible leadership quality that's just transcends the position. And I couldn't be more proud, absolutely. And I couldn't be more proud to know that you are the first trans man to be elected to public office in the state of California. And it's interesting because after this, I'm going to be on a panel about women and the movie Misrepresentation. We're going to be talking about that film, right? And I was thinking about that, and that it's really hard for you to, as a child or as a young person, to visualize what you could be if you don't see those people in those positions. And so for what you represent, children, it's extraordinary. And I know also that this month is LGBTQ History Month, and students have an opportunity to learn about local electeds who have made LGBTQ history. And being part of our Safe Schools initiative at the County Office of Education, I know there's a real intentional effort to embed authentic history into our curriculum. And I wonder just sort of your thoughts on that in terms of your process, but what you hope for the next generation.
Yeah, I'm so appreciative of the LGBTQ History Month effort. I think, it was so smart to think, we're in a pandemic, schools are virtual. How do we engage on, and I'm sure it's expanding to a lot of other topics, but how do we engage students with the larger community on these big issues that matter and LGBTQ visibility during History Month? I just thought the whole way the County Office of Education promoted and is managing this curriculum this month is phenomenal. I actually got interviewed by a student last weekend. It was really, really sweet. They were so nervous, but they did such a good job. They kept apologizing, like, I hope I'm not asking the wrong questions. I hope I don't sound too nervous. And I'm like, you're a pro. But that was just it. What I told her was, this is an opportunity not just for all of the students who will hear bits and pieces of my story and understand things hopefully in a different way, in a more empowered way as a result. This is also an opportunity for students to see other students stepping up into leadership. Her being able to ask in an authentic way, by prefacing, I don't know if I'm confidently saying your pronouns correctly or talking to you about your experience correctly, so I want to be cognizant of that, and may I ask you this next question? And there's that role modeling happening as well, which is just so, and so that's what I want for the next generation. I don't need to see the world change in an unauthentic way. That's probably the wrong way to put it. I hope the world doesn't change in this unauthentic way. I've been reading all of the comments the last couple of days about the Supreme Court nomination process for Amy Coney Barrett. And the comments she made, I believe it was 2 days ago, around sexual preference.
Yep.
And the way folks tried to then come in and appropriately educate, what does it mean when you talk about the rights of an entire community and sum it up as a community whose sexual preference could then be allowed or not to have? And what follows that is special rights, right? Because it's just based on preferences we have rather than integrally who we are. And I think about these kids and the way in which they're learning to be respectful. That's, I believe, where the breakdown happens and what I hope for the next generation. We've got a lot of adults who I think want to do the right thing, but I think don't really understand what the right thing is. They don't know how, because of all the way privilege comes up in life, to stop and look at disadvantaged or marginalized communities and have enough empathy to say, I might not understand, and it might make me uncomfortable, but I need to listen. You're a marginalized person. You've been through these experiences. Even if I'm coming from a place where I don't know that I agree with it, let me hear what it's about for you and be open-minded. And that's how we're raising the next generation of kids, for the most part. LGBTQ History Month is a part of that. And I'm so pleased about all of that. And I hope it continues to improve generationally.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack with what you just said. I was
yeah, I carry a lot of suitcases.
No, there's a lot. I mean, but because it's complicated, and I think about what Amy Coney Barrett had said, and I think that reopens a wound that really undermines the progress. And I think that the half-hearted, I'm sorry if I offended you, type of response also doesn't really help. And I feel like, when I grew up in high school, I don't remember one kid who went to school with me who was openly out. And I think about now with the GSAs, the Gay Straight Alliances, and just the openness for other kids to want to have, just for people to feel good about who they are. And so when you revert to saying this is your choice, it hurts, right? And so I just really want to acknowledge that. And I think we remember all of the progress, and it's the slow arc, I guess, that we also have to are constantly reminded by, and we were reminded recently by Amy Coney Barrett's comments, right? And so just maintaining that progress is so essential. And And I really want to thank you because I think it was many years ago when we were talking about leadership, you mentioned, instead of saying, men and women or brothers and sisters, you said people of all genders. Can you reference it as people of all genders? And I have taken that with me everywhere I go. As
I have seen that.
Have you? Well, you're the reason why. And I thank you enough because I want people to feel comfortable and be recognized regardless of their gender spectrum. And I've been reflecting because of being biracial and kind of fitting into either this or that. And it's sort of just this remembering of this spectrum of gray, of rainbow, of everything, right? It's more complicated than that.
It is. It's funny. It can be more complicated for sure. And it's also really simple, but I think it only becomes simple when you get through the complex part, which some of us are forced to do in our younger years, and some of us it's a struggle in our older years. But understanding privilege and the way minoritized communities of all different types, for all different reasons, where privilege is and isn't for people. And I think once people truly understand that and why privilege keeps some people in power and others not, it becomes a lot easier to be a flexible thinker and to just kind of roll with it. And, yeah, people of all genders, people, without having to get feathers ruffled, so to speak.
Right. No, totally. Well, you also brought up when you were talking about, leadership Santa Cruz and Cabrillo and your experience at Cabrillo. And I was thinking about one of the stories around Cabrillo's being this binding kind of this gel between our North and our South for our region as this sort of hub of access that's non-jurisdictional, like either South County or North County, right? It's just this accessible resource that we have in our community. And I took some of my favorite classes at Cabrillo. I love Cabrillo also. And I wanted to maybe give you an opportunity to share about what's happening with Cabrillo right now. What are some of the special programs that you guys have in place for various populations? Anything else you want anybody who might be watching to know?
Sure. I initially, when I ran, it was making sure for me that inclusion and access was really understood by all of the leadership at the college, which I felt like was really prevalent when I was a student there. Let's see, between 1994 and 2002. I worked full time, so it took me quite a while to get through my 2-year degree. But I have friends who have worked at Cabrillo College, and there have been periods where it felt like equity and access wasn't always the top priority. I feel really grateful to say it absolutely is now. The current president, Matt Wetstein, he's just reminded us how much the state requires, and we have an obligation to make sure that that's a priority. So I ran with that as my priority, and I've both been able to learn about how we've really infused that back into Cabrillo's center or core. We now have an Office of Equity and a director for the Office of Equity at Cabrillo. One of the most phenomenal things that I think is happening, Kofi is his name, has created a curriculum platform that for its first year and a half is just for faculty and staff at Cabrillo in understanding bias and how to support marginalized communities across the board in your pedagogy, so that as you teach, whatever it is that you're teaching, you understand whether it's a math class, whether it's in the humanities or the arts, you understand what the challenges are going to be for the various minority communities and how to make sure voices in education and about education really have equity. And it's in its third semester now. And because of the pandemic, we're not going to be able to move as quickly as I had initially hoped. but being able to open that up community-wide so it can be coursework that K-12 educators can take and that folks in the community should be able to have access to. I had a little bit of that. It was an important curriculum when I took early childhood education, really understanding it in the early childhood setting. And I'm so excited for what this is doing for our college and our community. So that's one piece of importance. And yeah, I've gotten to work with our Guardian Scholars program a bit. Those are our students who are former foster youth, current and former foster youth. And all the supports that they need and that they're getting. I know that Cabrillo, and not everybody is aware of this, Cabrillo is one of the recipients of the county's HEAP grant, which was homelessness funding from, I believe we received it about 1.5 years ago, or at least Cabrillo did, our first allotment of it. And what that does is we have a housing navigator on staff who does some case management, and she determines eligibility of students when they request assistance, and it pays for deposit and 1 or 2 months rent depending on the situation that the student is in, as well as helps them locate housing. And we also, it's a way to also help make sure that these are students who really understand how to and are accessing all the grant funding that's out there, whether it's to cover books, whether it's to cover food, supplies, and figure out what resources could help them really get a leg up on the things that they need while they're in school. There's so many phenomenally important programs at Cabrillo. I'm just so excited about them. And I've gotten to meet our student leadership, and I'm learning from them all the time. So
that's
thanks.
Wonderful. I think, all of the, all of the equity conversations that have been coming up really bring such hope to me, because it's not only equity in early childhood or K-12, it's throughout all of our systems, right? And we talk about trainings for our law enforcement or our hiring practices, or understanding that we all have unconscious bias. And I think that these conversations are so important to have right now, but we have to be intentional about that, and to offer these types of education opportunities for your students, but also for eventually the community is fantastic. Yeah. I know we don't have a ton of time left, but I guess I just wanted to also see, one of the things that we share is the love of early childhood education, but also how the role of Cabrillo plays in terms of our workforce development and our opportunities for basically off ramps to your career, right? So you have your K-12 and then potentially go and you get an AA or you get a certificate. And as a city, kind of with my city hat on, we really want to ensure that we're in communication with education so that we're able to help drive economic, development strategies and prepare and connect with the next generation of workers. And I know Cabrillo plays a really critical role with that as well. And that also requires that our students have the supportive supports that you mentioned, right? In terms of being able to access all of the necessary things to be able to learn in terms of housing and whatnot. What do you think we could do better? Like, how can we as a city, or what can our community do to support Cabrillo and just sort of help with the success of our, our students there?
Right. Well, I think in general, thinking through as we realize what the sums of money between CARES Act funding and some of the other economic development funding that's going to wind up coming our way, that's starting to come our way, how to make sure dislocated workers and folks who are going to become returning students to try to figure out how to get certified and re-enter a workforce in a way that's meaningful and keeps them moving towards or staying within self-sufficiency and off of needing aid in any capacity. The way that we spend the money upfront proactively to make sure students are getting those supports and they're able to enroll in classes, that's a big piece of it. I mean, and back to the beginning of this conversation, everything's so connected, right? Transportation. Once we are, because Cabrillo is virtual at the moment, but once we are back in session in person, it's how we're getting to Cabrillo and the ways in which we're making it easier or not in this community to make sure that happens. Making sure that people are able to earn a living wage. so that they can afford to only work 40 hours a week and go to school, if that's the situation. You know, I really think the ways in which local government makes sure we have enough in place so that people who want to get an education, earn a degree, transfer. We're a Hispanic serving institution. We've got a phenomenal program right now, STEM specific, for transfers directly for Hispanic and Latinx students to Monterey Bay, CSUMB. And we can provide a lot of support, but folks need to be in a place where I can go to school and be successful, because the other things in my life that I need to count on, the child care, the ability to get around and commute within my local community, the amount of time I have to spend working versus homework, that all of those things are falling into place so they can be successful at school. So I think there are many ways that conversation should take place.
It's so true, and as you do always so beautifully, you articulate the ways that we're so interconnected, and I really feel that one of the things that might be a silver lining of the pandemic and some of the recent challenges facing our community is just our interdependence and our connectedness, and our understanding that we all do better when we are able to thrive. And you know, my life and what is happening in my world impacts others and those that are providing care, or I mean, it's all this difference where we kind of went from these isolated kind of, I'm doing my thing, and you know, I know people are struggling, but I still do my thing. And so I do hope that as a result, we can move forward with recovery in a way that's going to bridge all of these different things. Yeah. I know that we're out of. Do you have any just sort of last final comments? I could talk to you for hours, really, Adam, but if you have any last comments you'd like to share before we close.
Oh, just it's easy to get in touch with me. If you go to the Cabrillo Governing Board website, you can email me through there. So if there's something I kind of perked your interest in and you want to talk more, anybody in the community, feel free to reach out. And I just appreciate you. I appreciate you having me, and this is fun. And I wish we had another half an hour.
We could do it again. Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate talking with you, and you're one of our local treasures here, and we're so grateful to have you representing us in education as Trustee. So thank you so much for your time. And I want to thank those who are either watching right now on Facebook Live, or who are going to watch later on YouTube, or watching it on Community Cafe on CTV. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. And Adam mentioned his contact information at Cabrillo, but you're also always welcome to stay connected to us on the website at martinewatkins.com. So with that, we'll go ahead and say bye for now. Thank you so much. Bye, Adam.